Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, also known as the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, New Road Capital Partners. New Road invests in proven technologies, services, and products that serve unmet needs in the marketplace. They look for companies in supply chain and logistics, as well as consumer-oriented companies. For more information, go to newroadcp.com. I would also like to disclose that I am a strategic advisor to New Road. I'd also like to recognize podcastvideos.com for the services they provide for these podcasts. I'm very pleased with their services. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. I have with me today Justin Hayashi. He is the co-founder and CEO of New Engen, Inc., which is a Seattle-based digital marketing agency. And you're really going to enjoy this podcast. I encourage you, if you're in marketing or in consumer packaged goods or in retail, you definitely need to be tuning in to this particular podcast. I would say also, if you are in supply chain management, especially from a broad perspective, you should be aware of what's going on in digital marketing, because obviously digital marketing has a big impact on supply chain management and vice versa. So I have this really interesting conversation. Justin is someone who really understands digital marketing. He's been in it for quite a long time. In the conversation, you're going to hear about some of the M&A activity he's been engaged in. We focus on two companies in particular. One has to do with the influencer marketing area, and they acquired a company that was actually an early player in influencer marketing for big players, big CPG companies in retail. We also tie that into a discussion around retail media networks that I think you will enjoy listening to and learning about. And we also talk about another acquisition they made in another space that has to do with affiliate marketing, and that he even ties all that together at one point that really was interesting to me, and I think it'll be interesting to you. But we also talk about things about, he's got a very successful digital marketing agency. When there's many, many digital marketing agencies out there, he's growing quickly and they're succeeding. And I think there's many reasons for that. But I personally think, after talking to him on this podcast, that a big part of it has to do with the culture he's created, the values he's created. And I talk about how, Peter Drucker was known for saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. We talk a little bit about that in the discussion. We also talk about future trends in digital marketing and what's going to have the biggest impact in this industry. So I encourage you to take the time to listen to this conversation with Justin. It's very interesting. Justin, I'm so excited about this podcast recording, and I can't wait to hear the story of New Engen and really the market gap that you saw to fill in starting New Engen. Would you mind sharing that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, of course. So I'll start with the pre-New Engen story, because I think that is good context for why New Engen was created to begin with. So prior to starting the business in August 2016, I was at a company called Zulily, which is an e-commerce company that was headquartered in Seattle, Washington, very much like the flash deal space. So if you had young ones from the years of like 2010 to 2016, 2017. Decent chance that you've maybe heard of Zulily. At least they're very focused on the moms, babies, and kids segment, and the flash deal model, which no longer is very popular, but back in the 2010s was a pretty common e-commerce model. And found the company in 2012. Just was at Boeing prior to that, and really wanted to do something much more data-driven, agile, and in some ways, I'm actually really glad that Boeing isn't agile because they're making airplanes and flying human beings. So they, the checks and balances are really important there. But in terms of my working style, I wanted something really efficient and data driven and quick in terms of test and learn mentality and agility. And so Zulily was just that. And when I joined, the company was very much about A/B testing, algorithms to identify the most optimal customer experience, and pricing models to email cadences and rhythms. And the company ultimately was, I think, the third fastest business to achieve $1 billion in revenue after Old Navy and Amazon in terms of retail businesses. And so pretty successful from that perspective. And they IPO'd probably a little bit too quickly, in my personal opinion, and then got acquired by QVC. And it was right after that QVC acquisition that I decided to, I was itching for something that agile, data-driven, entrepreneurial, and started interviewing actually initially with a handful of consumer businesses that were looking to replicate or take that Zulily marketing playbook and consumer D2C playbook and apply it to their business. And after talking with about 8 or 9 different CEOs and founders of e-commerce brands, some that have grown to IPOs, some that have boomed and busted, I offered to provide marketing services for free, and instead of joining the company. And at 6 months, if they appreciated those services and felt it was worth some sort of currency, then I would start a business around it and charge them for that. If not, I would go find a job. So that's how the company was started. And really, I think now we call it performance marketing or data-driven marketing. At the time, I just thought it was good customer acquisition in a D2C e-commerce context. And so that was how the business was started. I think a lot of companies were looking for those capabilities and skill sets. At that time, AI algorithms, not as automated and streamlined. So it was a lot of kind of actual agility, data analysis, real-time manipulation of the levers to drive growth. A lot about creative integration as well, which we can talk about a little bit later, and how do you kind of marry and infuse media analytics creative to drive better outcomes on e-commerce. And that's what started New Engine, and we've evolved quite a bit from those early days, but continue to kind of scale with that overall belief of how do we help companies and brands grow in the most accountable, measurable, scalable ways possible.
I know that your company, you talk about finding breakthroughs for companies. Can you give an example of a company you found a breakthrough for?
Yeah, there's so the very first brand that we worked with is actually a good example of this, and it was actually before New Engine was incorporated. So in that 6-month stage where I was talking to CEOs and saying, "Hey, I'll do this for free," and it was a cosmetics company that I won't list the name just because I think I'm not sure how that CEO and business would view that, but it's a very well-known business now, but a small cosmetics company that was based in Seattle, Washington. And at the time, they'd been around for a few years. They were a 3-person company, and they were using Shopify and just not finding scale in the way that I think they had aspired to accomplish when they started the business. And we came on, and in the early days of New Engine, we had a heavy technology bent. And built a lot of algorithms and software tools to help augment the management of media in the most efficient and effective way possible. And we were able to immediately drive substantial growth from taking over. And then the piece that really unlocked this business's growth from what I think at the time was about $250,000 in revenue per year to eventually 25-30 million in revenue per year over a course of 2 years was through creative testing and iteration. And so we call it finding the eye. So this is a beauty brand. So they did eyeliner and lipstick and things of that nature. But there was a ad that we were kind of constantly testing new creative around the eyeliner. and finally kind of found this really great ad that was a zoom up of the eye with the eyeliner applied and a GIF that just constantly changed colors, which seems so simple and stupid nowadays. But back in the day, everything was very much the type of ad you'd find on a TV commercial or a billboard put into a digital format versus thinking from a digital first mentality. And how do you get the consumer to stop scrolling through the feed, pay attention, and want to purchase the product? And that took the business to literally 10x overnight revenue increases just from that ad getting pushed out to the ecosystem and then scaling from there. And so that's literally our very first client that we worked with that grew to tens of millions of dollars in revenue over a very short period of time. But then we've also, our space and the clients that we service now are much more in the mid-market enterprise. So as we have grown and matured our business, we've continued to work with more and more mature, stable, established brands. So 1-800flowers.com is one of my favorite clients, if not top. It's got to be up there in the top 3, top 5. They are not just 1-800flowers.com, but they own Harry and David, P-Mall, Sherry's Berries, tons of Cheryl's Cookies, a lot of iconic brands that are e-commerce centric. And we started working with them in 2018, and they were I think around $1 billion in revenue at the time. And over the course of 4 years, the business grew to $2.2 billion. Obviously, not just on the backs of our marketing. That'd be foolish for me to take full credit for that, or for our business to take credit for that. Lots of good product innovation, really good supply chain delivery, but also paid marketing is a really heavy component of the revenue contribution. And the way in which we entered that business and our engagement was through what we call the head-to-head. And so again, kind of coming back to our performance-centric, outcomes-centric, obsessed mindset, we did a head-to-head with a holding company agency that had been working with them for years. And we took half the country, they took half the country. And we were essentially looking at the data, understanding where the incremental gains were in the business, and constantly optimizing those with technology and really good processes and people and acumen to drive higher ROI and higher revenue for the business. And then we've continued to take on really the full kind of digital marketing agency of record responsibilities for that business. So that's one anecdote that we look fondly on, and has been a really strong partnership for us over the years.
So Justin, when we think of marketing, we quickly think of creativity. That's something that pops into our heads when we think of marketing. And I know marketing is broad, product, price, promotion, place, branding. It's a broad kind of a concept. We're not just talking about advertising. So you talk a lot about data-driven marketing. How do you align creativity and a data-driven approach?
Yeah, I love that question. So creativity and data-driven or data are very much, we're huge believers that those need to be intertwined and in sync and looked at it side by side together. So more specifically, and I'll start with kind of what's colored my initial perspective on this throughout my career is going back to my Zulily days. So Zulily is a good example, and kind of more maybe an obvious one, where it's a flash deal company. And so the site turned over every single day. So every single day there's a new set of products and brands. They're heavily discounted, and throughout the day, those products sell out. And so from a advertising and marketing perspective, especially if you're advertising a set of products or a set of brands that are on the site, that creative needs to be taken out and put back into a new set. Well, a new set of creative has to be put back in the next day, or even throughout the day as the products sell out. And so that was a very kind of obvious, blatant example of where data and creative need to be married together. And you can understand as the inventory dries, the creative stops performing, and you need to now try something new. And so at Zulily, we actually, I think you could argue overdid it and not enough emphasis on brand, which I'll get to in a little bit. But we had a team of marketers that would use, I think it was this free software called GIMP, if my memory serves me correctly, that was basically Photoshop Lite for on the cheap, or it's actually free. And so we would take the product images of what we thought were going to be the highest performing sellers based on all the creative learnings we had amassed over the years. And our team would create white backdrop product. And that was 2013, 2014. Now there's a lot of, they call it dynamic product ads, and there's all kinds of ad formats that are optimized around that. Back then we were manually creating these because they were driving really great performance. And so constantly, I think we had 15 people working on these type of ads, and the ROI was there to justify that manual labor and heavy turn. However, now I think where digital marketing has evolved over time is the algorithms have gotten better, the automation has gotten much better, and especially in the last 2 years with a lot of this talk around like generative AI and the newest capabilities of AI, Meta and Google and these advertising platforms are even willing to take your assets and say, hey, don't even worry about what you've learned. We're going to figure out how to kind of dissect those ads and transpose those ads into formats that are going to be the most efficient for your business. Where that's taking the marketer's emphasis is more towards kind of the audience persona-based creative concepts and net new ideas. So instead of just giving these kind of performance product assets, who are we trying to go after as a incremental audience? So a lot of brands, as an example, are looking to acquire Gen Z customers nowadays. That's been the talk over the last 12, 24 months. Actually, maybe more than that. And what kind of content does Gen Z consume? How does Gen Z want to be spoken to? And it's now much more around persona-based creative concepts for that audience versus this kind of scrappy bottoms up, take the product, iterate on it, learn from the signals, and optimize your way through performance. But at the end of the day, whether it's scrappy image augmentation and iterations versus net new concepts for different personas, the data is still really important and very easily accessible in digital. And what's working for the Gen Z audience out of all the kind of concepts you've tested versus 5-10 years ago is around what types of white backdrop versus black backdrop versus certain types of products are going to drive performance. Ultimately, the data still informs a lot of those kind of decision-making opportunities. And so that's, I think, has not changed and will not change as we continue looking to the future.
Justin, I know that you talk about how important it is for your company to, in your partnerships with other companies, to form high levels of trust in those partnerships. And I know that there's been a lot of research on how people build trust within an organization. And, there's 3 key components. One is that you are capable. That means that you can actually get things done. You have the ability to do things. The second one is that you will do what you say you will do. Mm-hmm. And then the third one is that you have the other party's best interest in mind. So a lot of research has shown those 3 variables have a big impact on how a person in an organization, whether they be a leader or not, build trust within the organization. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, we're talking now at a different level. We're talking about a firm building trust with another firm. In your case, New Engen building trust with one of your partners. Would you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Yeah, I actually hadn't heard of those studies, but that's very validating because that's very much how I view how you build trust, and trust obviously is the reason you're asking this question, and is it's such an important part of our business, and you could argue any business, but I think especially for ours in the sense that we are a people-based company. Our product is expertise, it's our culture, it's our values, it's how we partner with the clients that we work with, it's our personnel and our team. We don't manufacture widgets or build software that we sell at a subscription price. It's really about human capital and people. And so there's trust within our 4 walls of our company that's really important to ensure that the product that we ultimately deliver to our clients is going to meet or exceed the standards that we articulate and that they expect of us. And then obviously there's a lot around how we partner and how we sell and how we ensure that we deliver on what we sell with our clients. And so from a high level framework, absolutely, it's a really, really critical part of our business. And the way, I think I think about like Gary Vaynerchuk as an example. Like in the agency landscape, there's these amazing kind of thought leaders that are really charismatic and can tell, they're great storytellers, and they're really smart, and they can on the fly come up with amazing kind of concepts or business strategies. Personally, as I'm not that kind of person, if it's not obvious from this interaction. As you and I were talking offline, like I'm a introvert. Flashiness makes me uncomfortable. Even like being on this podcast is slightly uncomfortable for me. I'd rather be on my computer and talking, shooting emails and having more internal conversations. And so that's on the one end, we don't over-index on that side of things. And so by default of like, I think our nature and our demeanor, what we say is we don't oversell, and we are very intentional about that. And we only deliver or articulate and deliver on what we deliver on what we say we're going to deliver on. Excuse me, I said that incorrectly. And so when we think about our employee relationships as well as client relationships, obviously when we start a scope or an SOW with a client, that may be relevant for the start of the engagement. But 6 months from now, when there's turnover on their team or their business strategies have changed or the macro landscape has shifted, that scope is going to have to evolve. But it could be a 12-month contract. And our mindset is always do what's right for the client and the business and adjust that. And that may mean it's disadvantageous for us in terms of our contract structure. It might mean a price reduction. It might mean a scope shift that makes it challenging on our side to resource. But ultimately, our North Star is to serve the client and the business's needs through all the ups and downs, regardless of what the contract says, and which is maybe bad business in the short term, but that's really ultimately played out very positively for us when we take a long-term view at it, because for us, our business is entirely referral-based, which I wish it wasn't. I wish we had a way to drive paid advertising for mid-market enterprise deals and scale it exceptionally well, but that's not how our space works. It's all about clients talking about us to other brands, or clients going to another company and saying they work with New Engine and had a great experience, so they want to bring us over. And so everything we do is about a long-term mindset versus how do we extract value in the near or midterm. Again, so that doesn't mean often going outside the lines of the contract or what's comfortable for us, but ensuring that we do right by the customer.
I can imagine that would be the case because there are so many players in the digital marketing space.
Yeah.
And while they have different niches, sometimes it's hard to tell what those niches are. And sometimes for someone who's not an expert in digital marketing, when you look at a website or even talk to someone, it's like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
But that gets to another point. I know that you all have Acorn Influence, the company Acorn Influence. I believe that was through a M&A deal. And so could you tell us a little bit about Acorn Influence and what it does and how it complements what you do?
Yeah. So Acorn Influence is a influence, as you can tell by the name, Acorn Influence. So it's an influencer marketing company and network of over 25,000 creators or influencers that and if there's, I don't know how familiar your audience is with influencer content, but essentially it is a type of content that influences customers and potential buyers of a given brand. And it's increasingly becoming a dominant or kind of primary type of content to help advertise and influence that purchasing decision. So there's a lot of tailwinds in the space. Acorn Influence is a kind of premium player in that space and heavily focused on consumer brands and businesses, large concentration and kind of enterprise CPG brands. So everyone from Coca-Cola to Procter & Gamble to Tropicana and a long list of really reputable CPG companies. Given the focus of a lot of our CPG clients within Acorn Influence, there's a tension of needing to obviously drive awareness for the brand, but also drive sales, measurable sales for retailer relationships. So whether it's Walmart, whether it's Target, Kroger, et cetera. And so Acorn Influence is what I believe, I'm biased, but one of the most agile, innovative companies within the influencer marketing space. So it's not just about having the network of influencers and connecting them with brands to drive, awareness on a campaign, but we're also constantly taking that backbone core of great quality influencer creator content and how do you maximize the upside opportunity for the brand. So as an example, one of the recent innovations that we put out to market this year, which has taken off for us, is this product called Canopy.
Oh, that's great. It's just interesting because retail media networks, I know aspects of it have been around for quite a while, but in our current conceptualization of it, it is fairly new phenomena. And it seems to be inspiring innovation in a lot of ways. For example, you're talking about how it's being used by influencer marketing, which I really hadn't thought of it specifically in that way. Makes total sense. But boy, I had just read something that said there's like 600 retail media networks out there now. So if you're a supplier, it's complicated to know which ones do you go with and how much money do you spend. But then also, the total spend this year, I think, is around, if I remember correctly, something like, I think it was 40 billion. And next year it's going to be like 100, in 2 years from now, it's going to be like 180 billion, somewhere in that ballpark. So it makes sense to be looking for opportunities to ride that wave. So I commend you for that.
We're overall very bullish. Yes, I see the same reports, and I think depending on what you look at, the projections might be slightly different numbers, but overall, every I think forecaster in the space is very bullish on the double-digit or growth of the retail media networks and advertising dollars deployed against it. And so how we're thinking about our product, not just within the influencer space, but holistically, is what are the innovations that we need to make sure that we meet the needs of the marketer and this ultimately their customers and how they make their purchasing decisions. So there's I think that growth is going to come through. I didn't know there were 600 retail media networks. So I was going to say more expansion of those retail media networks, but maybe it's more around the maturation of those retail media networks. Because a lot of the ones that we see, obviously we can think of Walmart and Kroger and some of the more established retailers out there, and they're, you could argue, much further along. But that mid tail and that long tail, there's still a lot of manual processes. There's a lot of human beings that are, taking Excel spreadsheets and budgets and just kind of manually managing them themselves. And so I think there's going to be a lot more, the friction in that process will be removed, and therefore making it much easier for agencies and marketers to deploy those dollars effectively, measure those dollars effectively. And so there's going to be a greater and greater bull case for why you would want to put funds in that direction, especially as we look out in the next, 5 years or so, probably even sooner than that.
Well, building on that then, the entire digital marketing landscape is changing rapidly. An example of that, of course, is retail media networks, but there's others. There's a lot of things going on right now. How do you stay ahead of the curve and react to or anticipate these kinds of changes?
Yeah. So this is maybe a tacky, corny answer, so I'm going to answer that not from a personal perspective. My process is reading the news and getting input from clients and getting input from team members and whatnot, and I think that's all nothing special. And and so that's my personal kind of quick summary of my personal way in which I like to stay ahead. But as an organization, which I think is much more powerful than just myself being ahead of the curve, because as an organization, if we could be a learning organization that's agile across the board, I think that will have a much larger impact. And so that's how I think about staying ahead of the curve. And where I believe that starts is very much with culture and values. And again, that's where my corny answer comes in here. But it's not just having culture and values, but being really clear with those cultures, those values that you have as an organization, and really enforcing that as an organization. So the way we do that at New Engen is we've got our 5 values, and I think there's 3 in particular of those 5 that hit on innovation, that fast twitch muscle, staying ahead of the curve, which is growth mindset, empathetic directness, and all in. And so growth mindset for us is, I think that there's been a lot of literature around that, a lot of research around growth mindset, but the idea of how do you continue to learn? How do you continue? If you see a boulder in front of you, how do you not shy away, but figure out how you get to the other side of that with extreme determination? Empathetic directness for us is, I think there's there's a book called Radical Candor, I believe, that was written, that was very popular, and it's kind of a similar concept, but in a world where we are a distributed workforce that works across 37 different states. We don't all get to have really close relationships and bonds, unfortunately, one-to-one. And so approaching directness with empathy and also hearing that with empathy is why we've kind of chosen empathetic directness. And then all in is having a company mindset versus an individual mindset. But I think those three in particular are elements that feed into that staying ahead of the curve, constantly thinking about innovation, saying what needs to be said so that we are doing what's right by the customer, not just today, but in the future. And the way in which we enforce those is through, we actually make our hiring decisions, our firing decisions, our promotion decisions, and our raise decisions based on our 5 company values and nothing else. And it's I think there's pros and cons to everything. The pros of that are it makes it extremely clear what we think is very important for success at the business and the organization. And with that, so that's kind of one of the key positives of that. The negatives, I would say, are there's other potential frameworks like the goals the what and the how, as they say, so the goals that you accomplish as an individual. From my perspective, that can all be embedded in the 5 values that we have, as long as we're kind of approaching and thinking about that holistically versus just like the soft skills. Because I think each of the values, while there is a soft skills element, there's also hard skills, and what did you actually accomplish as it relates to those 5 values. So that's how we set the tone of what we expect. And with that, there's a clear alignment across our organization of what success looks like, what innovation should look like. And so, that's how I think about it from a systems perspective. But then there's other things organizationally as well of how do we not operate like a cruise ship and not operate more like multiple speedboats. And so there's so take Acorn Influence as an example. What I would consider very much a speedboat, lots of innovation in short period of time, and that's very much a strength of the business. And there's I think some instances where we want to just we've got New Engine, which acquired Acorn, and some overlapping skills that sometimes we would just want to bring together because that's what you're supposed to do at M&A. But recognizing that the customer motion on the New Engine side versus the customer motion on the Acorn side are actually very different in terms of even the contract length, the expectations, the pace, a number of things. One has just a much more agile short-term length in terms of SOWs. The other has a much longer-term multi-year contract structure, deeper multi-level relationships. And so by bashing 2 teams together just because they have some overlapping skill set, we often, in some instances, we think that's more damaging to that. And so that's kind of the second piece of like speedboats versus cruise ships. How do we also ensure that there are speedboats within the business versus a monolith or one big entity just because that's what you're supposed to do as an organization?
I had heard before I talked to you the first time that New Engine was very successful, and I think I know why now. You know who Peter Drucker is, I'm sure. Peter Drucker is famous for saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I really believe that. I've seen this over and over in my lifetime. I think it's been shown empirically to some degree, although it's very difficult to test empirically. We've all witnessed it. If we've worked for a company that has strong and good culture, we see it. And I mean, you can have great strategies, but if you don't have a good culture, there's no hope in the long run. On the other hand, if you've got great culture, strategy is always important, but if you've got great, strong culture with strong values so that people have shared views and opinions of what's important for the company to succeed, et cetera, the company can move more like a speedboat because as things come up, we don't need a strategy for everything. We don't need a canned response to everything because we can say, how does this fit in with our culture and our values? I really like your value of the growth mindset. It's so much more enjoyable to work with people with a growth mindset, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I really, it's interesting because there's part of growth mindset too. It's uncomfortable, and it's, growing is, I should say by definition, but I think a lot of growth comes from experiencing new things and persevering through hard moments and challenges. And so I think there's as human beings that care about each other, there's this kind of inherent bias to want to not put ourselves through this kind of growth mindset or growth journey. But at the same time, I think, ultimately what I've seen from high performers and folks that want to make an impact is they actually want to be in an environment of people that are pushing each other, that are challenging themselves, that are putting themselves through tough situations to only make themselves and the business a much more successful entity or individual. And so, I totally agree with you. It's some ways counterintuitive, I think, depending on how you look at it. It actually is a lot of fun to be in an environment where everyone embodies growth mindset versus one where everyone's, just imagine the opposite, where no one has that, which hopefully most organizations aren't like that. But let's play that out. Hard to get things done, frustrating to push things through, relying on someone else, but they're not delivering for you on the other end and making excuses and whatnot. So if I had to pick one versus the other, they're both have their challenges, but I'd much prefer the growth mindset one versus the one that's relaxed and easy or non-ambitious.
Well, and your point about one of your values, all in, could you elaborate on that again just a little bit?
Yeah. So this is it actually gets misunderstood sometimes, and so I always like the opportunity to clarify, because when we first rolled it out, there was some misunderstanding that it was around giving all that you have to the company and sacrificing your own well-being and things of that nature. And that's actually not what it is. And so there's a subtext that we have that explains the all-in, specifically that says all-in is not about the hours we log. So that's like the one piece I always like to call out. It's more of a mindset and mentality. And so when you make decisions on the day-to-day, are you making those decisions for your own well-being or for your own kind of selfish reasons or whatever it may be, or are you thinking about it from an organization success? And so it's not setting the expectation that you must work 60 hours a week and do whatever it takes for the company at the sacrifice of your own well-being. It's absolutely not that. I like to double emphasize that it's about this shared purpose, this common vision, common goal, common mindset of let's do what's right for the business, because that will ultimately serve everybody well in the long run, as as it creates more opportunities, as it creates more success for the business. That's what we want to articulate with that specific value.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of my favorite biographers is Walter Isaacson. I've read lots of biographies he's written, but the one I'm reading right now, about halfway through it, is on Elon Musk. It is
okay. Yeah, this is the most recent book that came out. Is that right?
It came out this year, 2023.
Yeah.
I read another biography on him a few years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago. I can't remember, but it was called Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Quest for a Fantastic Future, and I liked that. But this one, well, first of all, I'm biased because I really like Walter Isaacson. He is fantastic. But I'm about halfway through it, and I know some people love Elon Musk, some people hate him, some people don't know who he is, but he has done some pretty amazing things, And one of the things he does is he always starts with the mission, and then creates the business around that, which is mind-boggling because, like, for example, when he came up with SpaceX, his mission was to save mankind. He believes that mankind will need to have inner space colonies to survive long term. So at any rate, he wanted to go to Mars, and everyone thought he was crazy, but he built a business around it that's working. High risk, very high risk, but in reading this book, and of course I'm also very aware of Tesla and many of his other businesses. When he says all in, it's not just all in terms of the mission, which is what you're talking about. His is even beyond that, and so I can understand why you'd want to clarify that, because
Yeah, he's an intense leader, driver of outcomes, and I haven't read the book, so I can't say I know it. I know exactly what you're referring to there, but from the anecdotes you hear around how he wants his employees to operate, and I think there's stories of him sleeping on the factory floor on a mattress.
Literally on the floor,
on the floor, no mattress,
without a pillow, without a blanket.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so, yeah, that is. I'm no Elon Musk, and nor do I aspire to be. And so,
no.
So that's another level that truly is unique. One of 8 billion, I guess. Yeah.
There are always so many things you can learn from these biographies on people, even if you don't want to be like them necessarily. There's still good learnings, and being able to distinguish between being all in from a mission perspective versus what Elon Musk might talk about is certainly important. But I like the idea all in and growth mentality. Well, here, Justin, you and I, it's December 27th as we're recording this. This probably won't be published for a few weeks, but we're recording it on December 27th. And I've always been I celebrate Christmas. I celebrate New Year's Eve. But, and I love Christmas. It's a wonderful holiday. But I have always, since I've been working, since I graduated from college, the day after Christmas, I'm back at work. Nobody has to tell me, especially when I was a young professor, I didn't have to. I mean, I didn't have to work on research during that time, but I always did because I'm all in, and I have a growth mindset about it. So I totally, and so when I invited you to speak with me on this podcast during this time frame, I thought he probably might not choose this week. But when you did, I thought, okay, I know a little bit more about him now. And then just hearing you talk, it all kind of fits together and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I'm curious, what drives? Why is it that I love this week? This is one of my favorite weeks of the year. Is the week after Christmas. But I'm curious for you, what is it that you mentioned all in, but what drives you to want to keep going? Is it interest or passion around the subject matter? Or is it a drive to accomplish as much as possible every single day? Or what is the mindset for you?
I actually enjoy work. First of all, I do. I enjoyed working at Dairy Queen when I was 14. I enjoyed cleaning pools when I was in high school. I've always been like this, but when I became a new professor, one thing I liked about it was when I could go to the university, go into my office and work on my research and have nobody interrupt me. So I get a lot done and not feel like I've got to rush. Like I can be really creative. I can think about things. I can experiment with things. I used to do more quantitative research than I do now. And I remember going in and working on my whiteboard and trying things and thinking through things. I just loved it. And actually even interviewing you today, I mean, you're the only one I'm interviewing today. No one's trying to reach me today, which is unusual, And so I had time to really think about this podcast. I read through everything on your website. I read through your background in detail on LinkedIn and other places. I even looked at a couple of videos that had been made. So I took my time to prepare and to think about, I always do to a degree, but I felt more free to do that today. And so I love these kind of weeks. How about you?
Yeah, it's almost identical response to you. So I really enjoy working as well, and I don't see a situation where I ever fully stop working. Maybe that's naive, and as time goes on, I'll have a different perspective. But I just really enjoy it. I always have. And so it's funny you said you worked at Dairy Queen when you were 14. I worked at Cold Stone Creamery when I was 14. So just a different ice cream
Different era.
establishment. But yeah, it's just always been a part of throughout high school and in college and all that. I've always been occupied from a work perspective, and then obviously in this construct, it's been a really unique and I never would have thought that I'd be in the position that I'm in when I was growing up, and it's just a blessing and also just a lot of fun to be able to think about building a business, ensuring that we're staying innovative and cutting edge, and also having the agency to be able to actually do that versus being part of a large entity that has a small part of a small sliver of impact within the organization. So it's a lot of fun from that perspective. And similarly, like I love this week. This is my favorite week of the year because it's exactly what you said. It's a quiet week. I can wander. I don't have back-to-back meetings throughout the day. I can work for an hour, and then I can go take a walk for 30 minutes and then come back and have different thoughts on that same topic and come up with new ideas. And so I really enjoy this year from a planning perspective, from a creativity perspective, from a resetting, and it like energizes me and gets me really amped up about January 2nd or 3rd or whenever the first work day is of the new year. And so, and similarly, this felt like a good, I was really excited by the opportunity to speak with you and being able to do it in a more, I'd rather do it this week than next week, because this week I'm a little more relaxed and in a clearer mindset, versus next week will be back to the grind and meetings and jumping from one thing to the next. So unfortunately, cop-out answer, very similar to what you just said there.
No, that's wonderful. And probably if you lived in Bentonville, we'd probably be going for a walk right now, talking about business and opportunities. Yeah. Maybe we can do that sometime. But
that sounds great.
The other thing I know that you talk about is the importance of experimentation and as a part of your culture. And I know that is, you can find all different kinds of companies where experimentation is a part of the culture. And a lot of people wouldn't think Walmart is like that, given how they're the biggest company. But actually, they're constantly experimenting. They developed buy online, pick up at store way before the pandemic. But they're always experimenting things. They're different kinds of drones, different kinds of inventory processes, different kinds of forecasting algorithms, et cetera, et cetera. But I know, there's lots of companies that experiment all the time. And it sounds, from what I hear, your company falls into that category as well. Would you mind speaking to that a bit?
Yeah, so I feel like that is I think every company likes to think they do, and so maybe I'm fooling myself, but but I do believe that is one of our core strengths and something that's been a evergreen, kind of persistent attribute or strength that we've had throughout our years. And so I'll kind of start with the genesis of the company, and we talked a little bit about this, but to go deeper, when the business was started in August 2016, so we actually had VC investors from Zulily that heard we were starting a company, fly up to Seattle and wanted to fund the business. And we weren't planning on raising, but we were enamored by the idea of getting a jump start. And at the time, we actually had a belief that, our business model that we thought was going to be around technology and software, so more of a SaaS play versus a services play. And so we raised the seed round, and then we did a follow-on Series A, and hired a head of sales for specifically engineering support to build a SaaS software marketing automation tool. And so if you read some of like our earlier press releases, which now I kind of cringe at looking back at it in 2017 or 2018, you'll hear a lot about like AI algorithms, automation technology company. And as we continue to grow as a business, we, the first few years we largely we called it managed services instead of an agency, which is what we are. But we called it managed services because our technology was not mature enough at that stage to sell as a software, like a self-serve SaaS platform. And so we'll be augmenting with managed services and using the software on your behalf, essentially is how we positioned it. As the business continued to mature, our managed services business continued to grow rapidly. And our SaaS business was seeing some wins, and we would win these kind of enterprise deals that were $250,000 per year, or our biggest one was almost $1 million a year contract. But it was really lumpy. It was not tons of volume. It was just kind of one-offs. And then ultimately, they would want us to just use the tool for them as a service. And so, taking enough signals over the last 3 years, we then decided to identify in 2019 as an agency and study the agency business model. So we didn't have a lot of things that agencies have, like from time tracking to how we think about process and training, and even the kind of the values. We were very much technology SaaS centric versus a services business. And so went through this pretty rapid transformation from a tech SaaS VC backed company to an agency services business. And also then at that point brought in growth equity investors to help us transform the business into more of a platform to do M&A activity, expand our capabilities to be a digital marketing agency of record for mid-market enterprise brands. And while we could organically try to tackle that, we felt that we wanted to go we felt the market was changing more rapidly than an organic build could do or could accomplish. And so went through an acquisitive route, which is when we brought in Acorn Influence. And then we also brought in another acquisition earlier this year called LT Partners in the affiliate partner marketing space. And so all that to say, that's all been in a 7-year time frame. And we're now just under 300 employees. And so I like to think that, we are, as far as like changing and transforming and evolving, that's something that's a given from my perspective. And in the space that we play in with digital, it's only going to continue to rapidly evolve. And so that's the strength that we really want to make sure is at the forefront of of how we operate and how we act. It gets harder with more and more people and headcount and departments. And so constantly trying to study even that of how do I think about running the business? How do I think about agility? What used to be effective for creating agility as a culture and strength in 50 people or 100 people is not the same as it is in 300 to 500. And so even the rules of the road have to constantly evolve and be studied. And so trying to apply that in every sense of the word.
So I'm very familiar with Acorn because I've known it for many years. For the university, back in, I think it was 2016 or 15, I can't remember. I did a video interview, not a podcast interview, for the college, the Walton College, of Myra Dallas.
Myra. Yeah, she's great.
The CEO of Acorn. So I've been familiar with Acorn, and I was familiar with it even before then. That's why I contacted her. Mm-hmm. But you said LP Partners was another acquisition?
Yeah, LT Partners.
Okay,
yeah.
LT, I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, so LT Partners, they're a affiliate marketing agency, and they're I don't know, for those that aren't familiar with the affiliate marketing space, there's I think the traditional kind of examples like the coupon code sites, and essentially if you're a brand that sells goods online or and you list a coupon code on any coupon code website, when that customer uses that coupon code, the coupon code site gets a percentage of commissions, and then the idea is hopefully it's increasing the probability of the transaction. So that's like I don't want to say ugly side of affiliate marketing, but how people perceive it from a negative perspective. The reason we made this acquisition is LT Partners is an innovator in the affiliate marketing ecosystem, and specifically thinking about driving the most incremental value, which I think many would argue coupon code sites do not accomplish. Because oftentimes, I don't know how you shop online, but my behavior is I find things I want, and then I'm like, I see that coupon code text box. Let me go online and check, and then if I can purchase it for cheaper, I'll do that. where the space that they play in is almost kind of like a PR agency or performance PR as a buzzword that's out there in the ecosystem right now. And it's focused on getting into Wirecutter or New York Times as an example, or the top 10 travel bags you need for the summer of 2024. And those are actually pay to play to some degree, in the sense that they are not pay to play. That's not the right way to put it. They are, when a customer reviews that article, clicks on a link and purchases, that Wirecutter or whoever published that article gets paid. However, the integrity of those reviews are really important, obviously. And so you can't pay your way onto that. Oftentimes, you have to actually have a great product. They truly do assess the suite of options, and then if you would like to be part of that affiliate program, then they can list you on that. So LT Partners, in short, plays more in that kind of more impactful is how we view it, but more holistic approach to affiliate marketing, as opposed to just the coupon code sites and trying to snipe that last transaction or that last click before that transaction. And so that was an acquisition that we made in June 2023, and quickly integrated them into our business, and already seeing a lot of good synergies between New Engine and LT Partners. And then we're also kind of bringing in Acorn's influencer buying capabilities, LT Partners, Acorn's influencer content capabilities, LT Partners kind of affiliate model of taking affiliate content that's promoting a product with a coupon code, but getting paid per transaction of that coupon code, and then using the content from a media perspective to drive performance. And so we've kind of brought the three together, early innings, but lots more innovation on that side for next year.
So Justin, looking to the future, what trends do you see in digital marketing that you think are most worthy of note and will have the biggest impact coming up?
Yeah, so there's two that immediately come to mind. One is very cliche and played out, which is AI. I feel like every CEO has to be thinking about it or talking about it, and there's like societal pressure to have an answer to what is your business doing with AI, and so I'll try to give a more interesting response than a cliche one here. But I think it is true. AI is absolutely having an impact already within the digital marketing space, and only going to accelerate as we think about the next few years. And so more specifically, actually, before I answer the question in more detail, like one thing that kind of changed my perspective on it, which was a speaker at a Google conference I went to, where they had their AI evangelist give like an hour presentation on how business leaders can utilize and think about AI. And they gave an analogy that I won't do justice here, but I'll attempt to, which is if you use the analogy of like baking cookies as an example, and the cookies are the actual cookie is the end product, end AI infused product, as whatever that may be. But then before you get to the cookies, there's the actual ingredients, there's the oven, there's the person that mixes the ingredients together. And so what part of that cookie making process do you as a business play in, or should you play in? And where most companies don't exist, but I think especially in the early days of AI, we're kind of playing around with, was the sourcing of like early in that kind of supply chain, if you will, of building the kind of infrastructure around AI, or building something really unique with the AI versus using it, being the end user and using it for more efficiency or what have you. So I think of myself as the cookie side versus the oven ingredient side, if that analogy lands in any way. I probably didn't do justice, but and so with that in mind, where the way we're thinking about using it is for making us much more efficient. So just like computers or Microsoft Excel or a lot of other kind of technological advancements that have happened, I don't think human labor, for the most part, is going to get replaced. I think it's going to make us much more effective and efficient at getting to the solution. And so that's how we are viewing it, versus trying to build something proprietary that's AI infused. I see a lot of companies, but even agencies, putting a lot of energy there. While I think there's potentially some first mover advantage, I don't think it'll be long lived. And I think a lot of those innovations will get commoditized or become mainstream and accessible to a lot of our businesses. So we're not wasting many cycles in that space in particular. So now more specifically, where I see it playing out already is creative iterations, as an example, which we spoke about earlier, where you give Meta or Google or YouTube or what have you assets that you want to advertise against, and they have already incorporated AI on their systems to take your assets and say, actually, this isn't going to perform very well because we have tons of data on what works and what doesn't. We're going to go ahead and make these changes for you. Do you approve? Do you not? And so there's already some automation acceleration of taking existing assets and making them better from a creative perspective. Also, when I first learned digital and data-driven marketing, it was a lot around like pulling data from our database, looking at spreadsheets, manipulating the data, and then making decisions. A lot of that kind of analysis and activation loop has been automated through AI, and so and it's accelerated in the last couple of years. So those are already advancements that have been made, and so I just see this continuing to increase. And so right now, where I see the next horizon of change is around the insights piece of, for an agency business model today, like we do weekly updates and they're manual, and we're looking at analysis and looking across channels and platforms and their Shopify or their e-commerce data or their brick and mortar store data and like coming up with insights. I think it's already there, but it's only going to continue to get better. AI will continue to drive those insights, deliver those insights, tee them up. You can train it and accelerate contextualize it for the specific brand and business. And so I think that's the next advancement of broad insights to now personalize to a specific business or brand, and that getting increasingly efficient and proficient. And so, yeah, that's obviously a space that a lot of people are talking about, but we are going to continue to think about that as an efficiency tool for us to provide a better service, better insights, much faster for our clients. The other trend that I think is very much impacting digital marketing at the moment is the convergence of performance and brand. And so there's been this concept, for those that aren't as familiar with the media and digital side, performance marketing and brand marketing have been, I don't know if at odds is too extreme of a way to put it, but there's been kind of two different types of marketing that are largely labeled as distinct and different over the last several years. And performance marketing being seen as bottom funnel. It's when the customer is about to purchase, you just do a search ad or retarget. They've been looking at shoes online and those shoes follow you, and you just try to get them to click and buy. Brand being obviously much more around communicating the brand, trying to pull at the heartstrings of the customer. When that customer becomes in market, they think of your brand first, or at least in the consideration set of brands that they'll select from. And because those disciplines have been perceived so differently over the last several years, you'd have a performance marketing team, a brand team, or a performance marketing agency, and a brand agency. And what we're seeing is those teams combine and converge right now. And I think there's a few factors that are pulling into that. One, which is performance has gotten much more automated with AI and algorithms and whatnot. That deep expertise is not as necessary, or it's not a skill that takes several years to cultivate anymore like it once did. And so it's much more accessible. Additionally, people, I think, the pandemic was a little bit of a not misleading, but it changed people's mindsets on that, where there were so many folks that were in market for e-commerce goods and digital goods that performance was actually much more important in those years, because you just want to close the conversion versus trying to drive awareness. And now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, the CMOs and brands that we work with are seeing, okay, now there's a lot of consumers that are not in market or will be at some point. How do we take a more holistic approach to the customer journey versus this siloed approach or overemphasis on performance? And so that's one thing that's been accelerating over this last year. We think it's only going to continue to move in that direction, where you're looking for a holistic, full customer journey mentality, as opposed to a performance bottom funnel, brand top funnel kind of a construct or mindset of marketing.
So Justin, there's so many digital marketing agencies out there. There's lots of them. Mm-hmm. What sets yours apart? What makes New Engen unique?
Yeah. I think the stat I saw recently is like there's like 20,000 digital or agencies in North America, and so yes, it's a very crowded space. And but if you look at the distribution of that, the very large majority of those 20,000, just as you can imagine, are sub 50 employees, many that are even sub 25 employees. And so a lot of boutique agencies make up the majority of the agency pie, if you will. But then as far as share goes, in terms of share of revenue, there's these holding companies that are constantly acquiring digital marketing agencies or traditional marketing agencies, creative agencies, and rolling them up into Publicis or WPP or Dentsu or whatever it may be. And so one of the kind of from a new engine perspective that's unique or different from both sides of the spectrum is we have a large enough scale. So we manage over $1 billion in media per year that we've got some leverage and a lot of insights and data to inform what's happening across the broader ecosystem. But we're not so big that we're stitching together a bunch of acquired subsidiaries together and teams that have never worked together to form a client team and say, here's your team. And so there's kind of this, I believe, obviously I'm biased, but a sweet spot middle ground, especially if you're a mid-market enterprise brand that maybe isn't Uber or isn't Procter & Gamble, which, if you're one of those companies, then the holding companies, you're very important to the holding companies. They're going to staff really robust teams. But if you're, in that middle market range where your revenue is, $1 to $5 billion, you might be lower on the ranking order for those large holding companies. However, the small boutique agencies are not going to be able to staff up and have the expertise to manage your business. And so for that kind of, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a niche, but that segment of businesses, we are, I think, a remarkably well-positioned fit in terms of holistic capabilities from content, media, analytics, and insights. A lot of buying power, a lot of scale and breadth of capabilities to ultimately drive growth. The other kind of defining attribute for us as a business is, and it's always been to the core, even from our technology days, and as we continue to pivot and evolve as a business, is driving accountable growth. And I like that terminology. It doesn't land externally very well because I think it's not a buzzword or phrase that marketers often use. But in our internal positioning and internal discussions around like what is our mandate and what is our kind of North Star for our clients is to drive measurable, accountable growth. And so even if it's a OTT ad or it's a digital out-of-home billboard, how do we try to understand the actual return on that investment when there isn't a click or a view that you can track all the way through the funnel? And so we've got a lot of capabilities around media mix modeling. We also have a lot of match market tests and geo lift studies and different types of experimentation and measurement methodologies to try to tie that ROI story together at every part of the customer journey, versus just staying in the digital performance lane and saying whatever, if they clicked on it and purchased, that's what we measure. We try to take a much more expansive view of that. And it seems like, at least from what we hear with our clients and prospects coming in, every year there's an increasing desire to understand the true impact of their overall set of marketing efforts across the full customer journey. And so that's another kind of shift that we see only increasing. And so we continue to bolster our capabilities and our personnel on that side of the house.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking time to visit with me today. This has really been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me, and really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing a little bit about you as well. So it was an overall very, very great conversation. Thank you.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.